Hello everyone, my name is Gwendal LIBESSART. I am currently in my third year of a PhD. My doctoral project is carried out in collaboration with the CEREMA of Trappes and the Laboratoire sur l'Environnement of Nancy. Through this presentation, I am going to talk about the first work done during my PhD on the characterization of historical trajectories in French cities, with the objective, in the second time, to better understand the states of urban soils. To begin the presentation, we need to consider the specificities of urban soils. 3 points can characterize them. The first point is that urban soils are highly diverse. Indeed, we can identify the wide range of soils from natural or pseudo-natural soils to technogenic soils. The second point concerns the physical-chemical properties of these soils. They are very heterogeneous on both the horizontal and vertical scales, thus preventing any extrapolation of results by conventional methods. Moreover, the difficulty of access to urban plots in order to characterize them is a frequent problem. Indeed, many urban areas are privately owned and access authorization are often difficult to obtain from others. The combination of these 3 points explains why urban soils are still very little characterized and mapped on a large scale. As shown is the soil map of Paris and its surroundings, where the soil type is not specified for urban area due to lack of available data. The heterogeneity of physical-chemical properties of urban soils is mainly explained by human practices. Indeed, all along its evolution, the soil is shaped by human practices that modify its properties. That's why human practices are considered to be the main factor in the pedogenesis of urban soils. All of these practices describe the historical trajectories of the land, which translates into a land use succession. Studying the nature of the historical trajectories of urban soils is therefore an essential element in understanding the human factor of pedogenesis. Historical trajectories of urban soils have been little described, according to the literature. They are generally encompassed in the concept of urbanization, densification of the city, and conception of agricultural land. However, it would be relevant to differentiate the states of urban soils according to their historical trajectories in order to predict the quality of these soils on a large scale. The objective of this study is therefore to characterize the historical trajectories of French cities, which would be the first step in the process of determining the intrinsic parameters of urban soils on a large scale. The study of historical trajectories focus on 7 French cities of different sizes and spread across the country. To define the study area, we chose to focus on the urban units of these cities, which represent a city or a group of cities with a continuous build-up area. Urban units of Lille, Paris, Nancy, Nantes, Châteauroux, Toulouse, and Marseille were studied. The historical trajectories of these 7 cities were studied using the Corinne Land Cover database, which provides land use change data between over the last 30 years through 5 milestones. In the second point, we made a more precise study of the urban unit of Paris, thanks to the MOS database realized by Paris Region Institute. This database provides land use data over the last 70 years through 10 milestones with a finer resolution than the CLC database. In this study, we have divided the urban unit into 3 zones with different dynamic of urbanization represented in blue on the map. Thus, the historical trajectories have been studied in these 3 zones. For these 2 databases, a unique nomenclature has been chosen. It's composed of 9 items covering all identified urban land uses. Through this nomenclature, we were able to specialize the areas that have changed land use, to know the occurrence of land use changes, and finally to characterize the nature of land use changes. The study carried out using CLC data shows that over the last 30 years, less than 5% of the surface area of the 7 urban units has changed land use. Moreover, more than 80% of the areas that have changed land use have known only one change. Concerning the nature of land use changes, the majority of land use changes illustrates the anthropization of the soils. On average, in the 7 urban units, 21% of the land use changes were from agricultural land to residential land. 25% were from agricultural land to commercial, industrial, public or military land. And 13% were from agricultural land to construction, landfill or quarry land. The results therefore show a similar dynamic of land use changes in the 7 studied urban units. Moreover, the main land use changes illustrate the anthropization of agricultural land. Let's now look at the locations of land use changes. On this map, 4 urban units are represented: Toulouse, Nancy, Lille and Paris. On each map, we can identify the areas that have changed land use over the last 30 years. Here, in blue. The build-up areas in orange, and the administrative limits of the city in green. We can see on this map that very few land use changes impact the city center. Indeed, land use changes are mainly located on the surroundings of built-up areas, illustrating the growth of cities. If we make a synthesis of we have just seen, the results from the CLC data shows that the majority of the historical trajectories of the studied urban units are represented by a single land use during the last 30 years. Moreover, other historical trajectories with land use changes have mainly known on one land use change representing the conception of agricultural land. Let's now look at the results obtained with the MOS database. We can notice on this map that many more areas with land use changes have been identified within the urban unit of Paris, represented here on the map by all the colored area except yellow. 36.3% of the urban units area has changed land use. This can be explained by the time period considered by the MOS database, which is longer, but also by the spatial resolution of this database, which is thinner. By doing the analysis by zone, we can conclude, as before, that the city centers is less impacted by land use changes than its periphery, with around 24% of the areas of the city centers are impacted by land use change compared to 50% and 34% respectively for zones 2 and 3. The land use changes are mainly located on the outskirts of the city. On this map, we can see that the proportion of these land use changes is higher along the Seine River and the main roads. Regarding the occurrence of land use changes, 70% of the areas with land use changes have changed land use only once in the last 70 years. In contrast, we do not observe any difference between the zones on these parameters. Regarding the nature of the land use changes, there is a difference between the zones. Indeed, the land use changes depend on the spatial scale considered. Here are 3 tables considering the areas that have changed land use in each zone. For each of these areas, we studied their land use change between their initial states in 1949 and final state in 2017 to deduce a surface distribution of these areas. We can be noticed is that conception of agricultural land of the acronym AL in the tables is more important in Zone 2 and 3 than in Zone 1. This can be explained by the total anthropization of Zone 1. The land use changes characterizing by this zone are described by the shift from one anthropized zone to another one. As you can see here, with a high proportion of land use change from industrial, commercial, public or military land to residential land. Using the 10 milestones in the MOS database, we identified the 5 most representative historical trajectories in terms of area. Over the last 70 years, the most representative historical trajectories are trajectories with no land use change, whatever the study area. The most representative historical trajectories with land use change are characterized by a single land use change and reflect the conception of agricultural land or area. Concerning the totality of historical trajectories, here is a graph with, which illustrates the cumulative curve of the areas represented by the different historical trajectories. At the scale of urban unit, more than 19,000 distinct historical trajectories have been identified. This number may be significant, reflecting the complexity of the urban factor of pedogenesis. However, if we look at the surfaces represented by the most representative historical trajectories, we see that only a few dozen trajectories explain more than 18% of the surface area of the Paris urban units. This is a major result for the determination of the states of urban units thanks to the knowledge of their historical trajectories. To conclude with this presentation, this study has further defined the human factor of pedogenesis by characterizing the historical trajectories of urban soils. Beyond this characterization, this study also emphasizes the importance of the choice of the database. Indeed, the temporality and spatial resolutions of the database are two determinant elements in this study of historical trajectories because they influence some results, as we have seen, between the CLC and MOS database. As stated in the introduction, this step is only the first step in characterizing the human factor of pedogenesis. The second step will consist in assigning to each of the identified trajectories the associated human practices and the implication of these practices on the soil properties. Thus, we will be able to determine the state of urban soils on a large scale from the analysis of historical trajectories. Finally, I would like to finish by thanking you for your attention, and I am available for any questions.